So we're here, episode 5, Rona season.
Well, hopefully today Congress will get something passed and maybe it could help some of us small business owners.
Yo, they should be in session right now. It's around noon.
Yeah, maybe.
They were supposed to go back. They left at around 3 this morning, I think, and they were starting back up at noon. So hopefully by the time we get done with this, they pass it. You know, last time we talked about that, they didn't pass it. We're like, well, maybe they'll pass something, and we finished recording and saw they hadn't. So.
Yeah, I saw Nancy on CNBC yesterday. I was kind of shocked.
Yeah, she's making a fuss.
Yeah. Well, come on, Nancy. Let's get this thing going.
But this is, so last week we talked about postponing the season. We were very excited for having guests on the show, but this is our first episode with a guest. So I don't have anything else to talk about before we run the titles. Do you?
No.
Okay, so let's run the titles.
Let's run them.
All right, so tell us a little bit about today's guest, Jay.
So today we have a buddy of mine that I met in business a couple years ago. Became good friends of mine. He owns a company called Cypress Safety Professionals, which he does a lot of. I'll let him get into what he really does, but he owns basically a staffing company all across America. And today I'd like to introduce you to Josh Corman.
Hey.
Welcome, Josh. Hey.
Thank y'all for having me.
Good.
It's good to be here.
So, Josh, what exactly, when did you get your business started?
I started 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm a Louisiana-based company. That's where I'm from. And like you said, we work all nationwide, providing safety consulting for different businesses, whether that be on-site safety or training, consulting, things like that. That's
good. So, in general, I mean, during the year, can you go from anywhere from 10 to 25 employees? That's somewhere in your range?
We don't handle a whole lot of employees. Actually, most of our folks are consultants, meaning they come with their own credentials, training, insurance, and things like that. Now, I double back that, making sure, you know, if we go on a gas company or somebody's property that we're insured up to the limit that our client needs. But
so you have 1099 employees that are totally put together with what they need for you to work under your
correct.
company.
So technically, I'm the only employee of the company.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, that's great. So what made you get into that industry?
I started out, my family's been in safety for a long time. We've been in firefighting or public safety. And then my uncle broke away from the fire department in the 80s and went into safety consulting, or actually not as a consultant, but an employee as a safety manager at a plant. And he did that for years and years and has worked for big companies all over the country, Bechtel, Chicago Bridge and Iron, whatnot. And we've my dad retired from the fire department after 25 years and decided to go into safety after he took a couple years off. He fished, he hunted, he did everything he could do, and he got bored. And so we were already in the safety realm and just decided to go in more into construction and general industry type safety and plants, refineries, you know, new buildings, whatever.
Let's go. So what do you think over the last 8 years, how many different bigger companies have you worked for or worked with?
It's so hard to say exactly, but I would put it up there close to 50 because of the how many people we sub. We've got a job going right now near Odessa, Texas with it's an Exxon job. We're doing work, the actual procurement company work for is KBR out there. And then the actual contractor we work for is Watkins Construction, providing safety for them. So it's there's always tiers of it, subs and subs and subs. But we're basically the safety sub for many contractors and gas companies and things like that.
So what's that process look like? Are you asked to bid on a job as a safety contractor? Or are you already like on a preferred list?
The first job, usually, yes. And then once we win a bid, then it'll be, would you do it for what you did it for last job? And that'll be based on the hours, you know, with the scope of work.
Right.
And with this going on now with COVID, we're being asked right now, we have a job being bid on through the federal government for providing safety that is going to go into impacted areas where they have a shortage of hospital beds. They're going to take hotels and gut them, pulling out anything that could spread disease, which would be carpeting, put a floor down that's sufficient to a hospital room. HVAC system has to be independent where you're not doing resupplied air. And we'll put a safety professional on that job to work with the contractors that are actually tearing out and demoing. And then I'm not sure what will happen with those buildings. Once the patients are in there, we'll be gone. We'll go to the next one. We're not health professionals, but we'll work with those contractors, get that done, go to the next one, and we'll see how long that goes for. I'm expecting maybe a month and a half, 2 months.
Right. And would something like this, like you're in this proposal process, you said, knowing you're the main employee for your company, is that something you do all those proposals yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it can sound glamorous to be the owner or whatever of a company, but you're all the way down to the secretary as well. And it is nice at a time like this when you don't have a lot of employees, because the worst part of any business is letting people go, laying people off. And we have had a few jobs come to a halt. So technically some layoffs where it's, I don't want to say company imposed, companies put everything on hold. So if we had 15 people working in the oil field, we've probably reduced down about six people as of yesterday that are on hold. And they may be on hold for a month. But then again, if the company decides, well, the project they were working on wasn't critical and we'll shelve that till 2021, then I've got to find a spot for that person, because everybody that works for me is a family member or a person I've worked with or right. Something like that. It's a pre-vetted thing. That's where I think where our success comes from.
Yeah, and so with that too, so I would assume that's a way that things have. This whole crisis is affecting your business and the model it is, because safety inspections are things that have to happen. They're not, it's not a luxury item that can be tacked on and things like that. Like they have to happen. But when projects as a whole are all come to a stop, every piece of that stops. So that was going to be one of my questions, but that kind of answers it already in regards to like how this is affecting.
Well, to
your
expand
business.
It just a little bit on that, most people are realizing you're getting redone or reclass on retraining on civics and free enterprise at this moment, and finding out that dropping a price of a barrel of oil or something that happens overseas or domestic can affect their ability to work tomorrow. So you can get real small-minded and think only about me, but we are tied together, all businesses, because we are an auxiliary business of contractors. And if contractors aren't building, we're not working.
Right.
Or gas companies aren't doing anything. They're sitting on their money and they're not expanding. Contractors aren't working. We're not working. So that big puzzle, once someone gets laid off or it affects them, they all sit back. So I have a feeling when we come back, I was listening to the president talk, I think the boom, the pendulum swing back the other way is going to be double of what it's been, and there'll be a lot less complaints because you're just thrilled to be back to work.
Yeah,
to go out to eat dinner, whatever.
Yeah, I made the comment yesterday to one of my friends who leans the other way than I in regards to politics, and I was like, both sides of the aisle are shit in the bed right now, and it's going to come to a point like if this doesn't pass today, we're going to get to Thursday or Friday, and it's going to be executive order, and everybody in the country is going to praise the president for once, and maybe only for 30 seconds, but the fact that something happened,
Yeah.
And I was just talking with some guys earlier. It's like I follow politics very heavily. I enjoy it. Don't really care about policy and issues really. I just enjoy watching and keeping up with politics. And it's interesting to me now that the government really matters to everybody.
Right.
How it's opening people's eyes to how nothing happens. Like nothing can get done. It's like, oh yeah, I'm glad y'all are finally.
People don't really know how many bills they're just trying to throw in, little policies that you think we're just worried about this, but somebody's throwing a completely different opposite thing.
Right.
It has nothing to do with the economy right now.
Trying to tag something along that they couldn't get past before, but
Right.
in desperation mode, trying to get something.
We need this.
It hurts everybody
to
else.
happen.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, like you said, it's not solving the problem today, and it's the American people are finally seeing like who are y'all working for?
Mm-hmm.
Y'all working for us? Yeah,
Yeah.
Anyway, so another question I had is we always talk about revenue and keeping and how businesses make their revenue, obviously. But with your jobs and knowing you've got, like you mentioned that you would quote the first time and have to go through a bidding process, and then kind of like it's a preferred, hey, can you work at this rate again? Do you have jobs that are ongoing for like say a year or 2 years or things like that? It's just like a monthly commitment you have. Is that a thing in your business?
We'll start a job. It could go a month, it could go a year, but we may finish that job, and we've had good success putting out quality people. The way I do my splits with my money that comes in is, and it's our money, is split at 80-20. So our guys that are in the field are receiving 80% of the money that we get from a client. Now, that could change with certain jobs. It could be less, it could be more, but usually around the 80-20 split. And what that allows me to do is to keep my prices low, but also provide a high quality safety person and do my business in volume,
Right.
Versus be the most expensive piece of rental equipment on the job, which we are rental equipment. We're a person, but we're equipment, and we have a knowledge base with safety. But if you're the most expensive person on a job site, they're counting the days. Usually how it works, we'll have a quota. If you're working on a construction site, and it just depends on the gas company specs and their safety culture, you say like, okay, for every 25 contractors, you got to have one safety person. So we got a job with 100 people. There's 4 safety people on it. As soon as it drops under, 25, they're trying to get that safety person off the payroll. And so if you're the most expensive piece of equipment on a job site, you're the fastest person they can eliminate, unless there's
Right.
rules like that. So a lot of times safety, things that have happened in the past events, like everybody always says, safety's paid for in blood. OSHA rules are made in blood type thing. Something happened somewhere. And so we are glad that there is an OSHA. If there was no OSHA, there'd be no reason for us. We're glad that there is a state OSHA here in North Carolina as a state that does that. California has their own OSHA as well. We're lucky that is in place, because with no rules or regulations, there would be really no need for us. And many companies would say, well, we're not going to pay for that,
Well, Josh, on our podcast, we've gotten to talk about how businesses get started and how they get funded. When you first started your business, how did you fund those first invoices when your employees are working and they're looking for that first check,
Yeah.
but you're 30, 60 days out? How did you start that process in the beginning, and what adverse and problems did you come into with doing that?
When I got into safety, I worked for somebody else, and that was as an employee. Then I helped a friend of mine, start a safety consulting business, and then after about 4 or 5 years of that, I did my own. So I kind of like saw the traps, the holes, the little things that needed to be different.
Nice.
And so I was able to take kind of the best of both worlds and put it in there. But what I've seen in the past is with new companies, is the hardest thing is waiting to get that first check. And the gas company and our oil and gas business is a great business. They have a lot of vendors, and if you're not on that list, you got to beat the door down and get your first check a lot of times. And a lot of times it's 90 days out. As long as you know that, you can factor that in, whether it be loans or things like that. But how I got started was, I basically a family personal loan. Actually, my stepmother, who just passed away, gave me $20,000 to start the business, and I paid her back. And then when we got there, I said, would you like interest or whatever? And she said, no, I just wanted to help you. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity. That $20,000 has turned into where we have 15 people working with us.
Multi-million-dollar company.
Right, and 15 families that eat off of our safety every day,
Yeah.
Whatever you want to look at it. So that's what I'm most proud of.
Yeah, so that's something we talked about in episode 1 or 2 about like the ways of the like top 5 ways of financing, and a family loan was the number one
thing.
first one. Yeah.
And then I came to North Carolina to work for Piedmont Natural Gas, which is Duke Energy, and a lot of different companies here have been in and out of North Carolina working for different companies for a while. But I was able to link up with some good business people and figure out some other ways to raise more capital through loans and financing and things like that. whether it be a line of credit or factor funding and things like that. They've helped me along the way. But of course, when you're new, and I mean new, like anywhere from 1 to 5, 6 years old, you're gonna have a harder time going and get an SBA government back loan with low interest. So you got to be ready to pay those higher interest rates, and
those factoring fees can keep real expensive
monthly.
Yeah,
and but without that, you wouldn't be able to do business. So we just, as long as you understand it, it's all business, and they have to make their money too. That's their business model, and you factor that in. You'll be okay.
Yeah.
So when you were working with Duke, where did you come in working with Duke in regards to or Piedmont? Excuse me, came in working Piedmont. Did you come in working for them as an employee or as a contractor?
No, as a contractor, actually on a job here in Greenville. They had a line that ran from Greenville to Washington, or Little Washington, which they actually dug up recently or rerouted in some areas where the new interstate passes by the college there. So anyway, that has been redone. It'll constantly, you have to have so much basic coverage of dirt over a line that runs under an interstate or railroad track or that kind of thing. So if my normal coverage over a pipeline might be 5 feet and we're running through a field, when it hits a major roadway, first thing you got to have 10 foot of cover, and you've got to have valves on each side of that obstacle to be able to shut that in if there was somebody getting out in the farm field, didn't make a one call and hits that line. So for safety, it's all back to safety. But anyway, I started out working with a contracting company that was doing inspection services for Piedmont Natural Gas. We did a line. I've probably put in from here to Hickory to Asheville, Raleigh, Wilson, Concord, all over the state of North Carolina, South Carolina Electric and Gas, PS&C, which is Dominion, and Piedmont is Duke Energy. So we've done a lot for them. So I started out as basically a third party contractor, inspector, working safety.
Because they go ahead.
I was just going to ask. I'm trying to get to. Was it your company or were you working with the company?
It was and that's a good question, because a lot of times if you own an inspection company but you don't specialize in safety, I will sub those safety folks to you, whether that be a oil and gas or a government job or general construction, or you come across something you need a OSHA 10-hour, you need training. We can provide that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, because on stuff, Josh, when like say Duke has a contract and they're going to give it to Piedmont or Watkins, they need an oversight guy, and you become that oversight because they don't want to hear from the actual contractor doing it. They want someone to watch that contractor. They need an outside third party, where your company provides, correct?
Yeah, not to get, people watching this would want, interesting things to talk about. I wasn't there, wasn't any part of it, but I don't want to be involved into it. But yeah, like there's been FBI cases where a company will win a bid. They'll come out for a gas company, and they'll get way out there in the middle of nowhere. And there are, like, for instance, logging mats that you need to roll heavy equipment in real soft areas. And it's more expensive to pull it out of the wetland or the right-of-way than it is to just dig a big hole, bury everything in it, burn it right there, and cover it up. Well, there's been cases where people have gone out and buried mats and said, well, we had 10,000 mats, and you really only buried 7,000 of them. The burying was illegal. The burning of them was illegal, and there was 3,000 mats overcharged. And if you start talking $200 to $500 per mat, it starts adding up. So river weights, things like that. So fuel, how much footage do we get in a day?
Right.
So inspection is a big part of construction, and if you are a gas company or any energy company, you want some third-party company looking out for your best interests. So when the foreman for the contractor turns in, how much footage do we get? The inspector seconds that on his report, and it all jives at the end of the job in a big job book. Says it was installed properly, because back to government regulations, DOT runs all of that through PHMSA, and they also run, not only how deep does something need to be buried, what qualifications does the person need to be welding on it, who needs to oversee it, all of that. So it's all got to be archived, and it's basically kept in a job book. But that's where our oversight is.
Yeah, because you've told me before, too, where you got to make sure they seal something correctly, where you might be looking at a hole for 16 hours to make sure there's no leak coming out of there.
Right.
And you have to make sure all those pressures, work out proper before they fill that thing back up.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a lot of public safety, too, because, I mean, that's going to be left behind on someone's land. There's going to be someone's grandson that rides through there on a tractor, let's say tilling up land, and if we didn't bury that pipe at the adequate depth, or we didn't cover it properly, or whatever it might be, or we didn't weld it and x-ray it, and let's say we say, yeah, all these wells were x-rayed and none of them were.
Yeah.
The one that fails and blows out, what if it's under a school? Or next to a church. There's a lot of public safety when you're dealing with utilities. We do a good job in a lot of ways in oil and gas, but we do a poor job in a lot of ways impacting and telling people how the lights turn on, how they get water, how, just all of that really, it comes from somewhere. And North Carolina, especially with the environmental regulations, has really impacted the pipeline business, and that's why there's been so much activity here, is because companies like Duke Energy are trying to go away from coal fire. They're going into plants that run on natural gas. That's the lines we've been running over the last 5 years. Yeah. So we've worked in Wilmington and at the Sutton Steam Plant. Well, that is a huge coal ash spill a few years ago, because they literally had to make impoundments to hold millions and millions of cubic tons of coal ash that was burnt. Because obviously when I burn coal, there's a byproduct with ash. Yeah. What do you do with it? Well, it used to be scooped up, put in a pond, and covered with water to keep it from blowing around. Well, when that levee or dike breaks and it gets into a river, you've got a major problem. Yeah. And so anyway, long story short, again, back to regulations, we have been benefited by having politicians and people wanting to go to clean burning natural gas power plants.
Yeah. I read I did the math. I have a question, so I'm going to put a pin in my question and go to this. I did the math one weekend. I was looking at it in regards to the amount of natural gas that's underneath Alaska. Mm-hmm. And it's if every house in America, every average size home left their lights on, it was enough energy to power the United States for about, I think it was like 25, 26 years of constant, every light in every house in America on. It was like, man, this is ridiculous.
I was talking about my uncle. His name is Chris. Uncle Chris went up to Alaska during the mid 80s, and built the Alaskan pipeline. And if you'll see, a lot of times the Alaskan pipeline's above ground in a lot of spots, and it's protected by guards and whatnot because it's vulnerable above ground. But digging below ground when it's below freezing is almost impossible. And a lot of people don't know that it's not the same. But a lot of this eastern North Carolina, South Louisiana, they have a lot of marsh and bog areas. The mosquitoes are horrible in the spring and summertime in Alaska. Yeah. If you get carried away in the woods there, I mean, you just think of snow and whatnot. But anyway, it's harsh terrain, and it seems funny that wherever there usually is harsh terrain, there is usually heavy loads of oil and natural gas in their shales there, their shale play.
It's also, Alaska's got that permafrost too. Yeah, it literally never thaws out ever, unless you leave it open to the sun for forever, Yep. But the question I was going to ask, so you mentioned about like the cases, like the pallets, pads, mats, whatever you call them. Sorry, mats, right? Yep. They What does that have to do? So you are a third party involved with that. That person gets in trouble, fine. Does that come back? Like, are you involved? Are you liable in any way?
In that situation I was talking about, the FBI literally called those inspectors that were part of that job and wanted to know their side of the story and where were you at when this happened. But there's usually a counting process. So inspection can be looking at environmental regulations, safety. There's usually a safety inspector, a environmental inspector, a welding inspector, a coating inspector, ditching inspector, a right-of-way inspector. There's usually all of those, at least those positions, and they'll call a utility inspector who can cover multiple jobs on a job. So let's say the line they recently ran here in Greenville was almost 30 miles to reroute some of that. They probably had 30, 35 inspectors at the height. It dwindled down to where there was just an environmental inspector going around with the environmental crew and making sure that they seed, crimp the soil, their erosion, which is BMPs, the best management practices, their silt fences, their wattles, and all the things that basically keep you living next door to having this big runoff or flooding someone's house, because that's happened before. You put a big silt fence up, it fills up like a swimming pool, and it breaks, and you live next door downhill, and we just flooded your house. So there's a lot to the oversight. The contractor knows what to do, but as anyone knows, and not knocking contractors, we love them, we want to work for them, but you have to play a different role when you work as a safety contractor or inspector for a gas company. You have to remember what hat you're wearing and who you work for, and then when you go to the contractor side, because they're working on the same project, but they have different bottom lines.
Right.
So you gotta really know what you're getting into and doing there.
So is that, with the FBI calling your inspectors, is that a fine or a penalty you would see and your inspectors would see, or is the possible repercussions being sued by your client?
It would be not just the fine and the legal with the environmental and things like that. It would also be fraud.
Right.
And if you're an out-of-state company, and let's say I was stealing something and trucking it across interstate lines, you could start getting into federal charges with that, and just different things like that. But you could be in trouble legally and financially with fines and court cases and things.
But the relationship of you being in trouble would be between a government entity, not so much the
you
client.
basically showed up and said, we're going to have oversight on this, and you were complicit in allowing. So that's why there is third-party inspection.
Yeah, it's like in our world, in the agency world, like sites we build. Like I've got to do this later today for one of our clients down in Florida. Their site has to be ADA compliant for visually impaired, things like that. So, but they could be sued. Their company could be sued because they weren't, and there's nothing stopping them from turning around and suing us because they trusted us to do it. Right. Whereas that client cannot sue us, but they can sue our client, and then the client can then in turn do that. And now the ADA is not penalizing people for it yet, so it's not like we built it and we get the penalty, but just thinking through that process. Anyway, hello. My name is Spencer Bunting. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Blue Collar CFO. I apologize for this interruption. We want to take a quick moment just to thank our sponsor for this week's episode, J. Scott Investments. J. Scott Investments is a small business banking that works for you. They have over a decade of lending experience, and J. Scott Investments offers something that the market hasn't given business owners before: a partner and an advocate. Fund solutions tailored specifically to your business needs. Their secret is a contractual relationship with direct lenders. This allows compensation without having you feel the financial burden. So contact them today. Go ahead and get peace of mind when you partner with J. Scott Investments. Start living your dream career. Start easing out some of that financial burden you may be facing right now and plan for the future like we talk about on Blue Collar CFO. Seek funding before you need it. Apply now. jscottinvestments.com/apply now. Let's get back into the show.
There's one thing that I guess I'm giving them a plug for free. Maybe they'll give me a free year of membership. There's a vetting service called ISNet World, kind of like when you go to a credit agency or whatever, and they run your background and they're getting your credit history, and they're saying, can you afford this house or this car, Equifax or something like that. Well, anyway, there's a company called ISNet World, and if you are the contractor, the gas company, and I am the safety firm, you want to reach out to me, you send me an invite through them. Okay. Right. Then I submit my insurance, all of my credentials, everything to them in our training. And if they meet your standards, then I get a green light. If it's not yellow, it tells me what's wrong. Red means we didn't pass and we're never going to work for them. So that is a vetting agency that basically will go through and make sure, not all the way down to our drug testing policy, all the way up to our safety manual and our past work history, and they also will look back at our EMR rates and things like that. Safety-wise, have we had any safety incidents? Because it's very critical when you start talking about recordable injuries and things like that happen on a job, lost time. It makes you harder and harder to sell yourself to a company. So there's a vetting agency called ISNet World. There's a few other ones, but that is a big one. That if you wanted to, we know each other and you know that I do a good job, you still have to send me an invite through there, and we still have to meet those. So most times when you're talking about legally, they make you have insurance credentials that are out of this world, including umbrella policies that basically would cover anything and everything that keeps that off of them. I mean, it's just a part of doing business.
That's right. And another thing that your company does, I know Josh doesn't just work in the oil fields and different lines. He also does stuff for companies that are working construction on bigger stuff to make sure all the stuff's getting done on a roof, make sure no employee falls off, make sure they're being safe the whole time. So when it comes to your business, you do a lot more than just certain things. You're there for almost any business looking to make sure that everybody's complying with what they're supposed to do, whether it be OSHA and you giving a class out to make sure everybody's OSHA certified, and or making sure that their employees are doing the right thing by another third party when it comes to just about anything, when it comes to construction or working and outside.
Oversight is, the biggest thing we do. And right now we're doing a job at Camp Lejeune, which military bases in North Carolina are so big in the fabric of North Carolina, and this is a huge defense, area, especially on the coast. But anyway, we're working at Camp Lejeune there. We're doing some work at Cherry Point. We hope to get much more, and some of the stuff I talked about with the converting hotels and into hospital rooms. All of that is done either through NAVVAC, which is the Navy facilities, or through the Army Corps of Engineers. They work under a manual called EM 385 1-1. That is their book, their Bible of safety. Like OSHA still exists and can come on any of those bases, but we work with the contractors on those bases to make sure that when they are working above 6 feet, especially, that they are applying the proper EM 385 and OSHA standards to fall protection. Because a guy that owns a roofing company, God love him, he's a hard-working guy, but he'll go down to the gas station and grab a cup of coffee in the morning. He'll see two guys in there and say, well, they look like good, strong guys. They could do this job. And they became roofers. And maybe the only time they ever been on a roof is to hang their Christmas lights. So here I am, and as the safety person that has to catch that person up and realize they need to be trained and understand how their fall protection works and that type of thing, because there is also an oversight person over me that works for the government, whether it be a ET, which works for NAVVAC, or a CB, which they do construction for the Navy, will come and actually audit our sites. So if I'm the safety person standing there allowing them to work illegally and I become complicit in that, I lose my job. Right. So oversight there's always those layers,
We always come back to the roofer.
The roofer.
Yeah, it's like this. The roofer is always like the theoretical guy we're talking about.
Theoretical blue collar guy.
So it's nice.
He's a hardworking guy.
It's nice
too,
you went there without even planning.
Respect the roofer for sure.
And a lot of things with Josh too. He's not just the owner of the company. He actually works a lot to make sure everybody's doing it and trains a lot of people. I'm
always the guy, especially close to the holidays, where somebody needs off, or I don't know, we've had a lot of hopefully they say things happen in threes. We've had some personal things in my personal life, some family stuff. We've had some people that we work with that have had some things going on. So, and then we've had this coronavirus. So, I'm gonna make
everyone's big three.
I'm gonna make like a T-shirt when we get out of this, like you can't beat me, recession proof, basically.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, whatever. But we're just really happy to be there. I mean, we're allowed to be on site, and I say allowed because there is those regulations. They have to have a safety person there. We're very, very fortunate that there are rules and laws and regulations, or there would be no need for us. Because back when it was the Wild West and they were building railroads, they were using Chinese workers, and half those people were running around high on.
They weren't Teamsters?
No, there were no union. There was no laws, and that goes back. We've done a lot of union pipeline work, and a lot of union work, and that you have to explain that too. There's a lot to this. Like, so for instance, if I want to tell a union worker, and they would call them a hand out there, if I want to tell a hand, hey, I need you to start wearing your safety glasses. I've noticed you take them off all the time, and you're not going to know when that guy's grinding that piece of metal flies in your eye. There's no time to say, hold on, wait, let me put it back. Well, anyway, you have to have a protocol for that.
Yeah.
Going to talk to his supervisor and foreman, and that person goes and tells them. So if you don't understand that and you go out there and put your foot in your mouth,
Before the shop steward shows up to get you.
you can have a problem. So there's every job we work on, whether it's government or just a regular commercial job or oil and gas, has different layers. And the people who are good at this business, they know safety. But the most important thing, I think, in any business is attitude and being able to get along with people and knowing your role and being able to say, no, I won't be complicit in that because I know where the line is. But it's very important to know the line and your role.
Right. We were just talking about that earlier. We were having a heated conversation. It's just kind of like, hey, heated conversations we get done with, we're done.
Right.
You know, like that. That's how I am. Like I'll piss somebody off in a minute, but if it gets us moving, it gets us moving. But it's also like knowing that proper chain too.
Yep.
With so bringing it kind of back to
you'd enjoy the oil field, then you get chewed out, cussed out, and then y'all out drinking beer at the end of the day.
we joked earlier with the owner of the agency. We were like, our job is just to get you as mad as we can. so you fuss at us, so you like release that stress, like, and keep it, not keeping it bottled up. So
an event. I tell my guys that all the time. I said, if you're about to go off on somebody on site or vent on somebody, call me and vent. You can say anything. You can MF. You can do everything you want on me, and then we can talk about it, and that usually gives them a clear head. So that's my job too, not just to fill in for people and to go out there and work sites and things like that. A lot of times I will be the first person on a site because, as y'all know, in a business, whatever they see first and whatever product they feel like they're getting, they're judging that the value and is it worth what we're paying right off the gate. And if I can't do it right, then we don't need to be doing this.
With what you do in the safety world, does the standards you work by, obviously they're put in place by people that aren't you.
Mm-hmm.
You're following other things. Is there, as a contractor and as a business in this world, are you limited in how you can charge and what you can charge in any type of way? Or is that basically up to you?
You are. I mean, we do go back and forth in the negotiation. A lot of times if you're working for the gas company, you can make more money. You can charge more. And that's because you're closer to the source. It'd be like closest to the water well. The more hands it has to go through, the less the less you can really charge or make. When we're working for the contractor. But one thing I'm really careful of is not people talk, and if I give one contractor a deal and the other contractor that I'm working for at the same time doesn't get that same deal, if they ever end up in the same room together and be like, well, why is he – it really can cause some hard feelings. So you got to be careful. So I've kind of tiered it. Directly working for the gas company, the next level of oversight would be your inspection company. That's a price. And then the contractors have a price. And try to stay in those three levels.
But there's nothing like restricting you. You can charge what you want to charge.
You can charge what you want. I mean, when I went to Texas back when, we were working for Chesapeake Energy, and they had a lot of investment money. Sorry. Sorry to bring that up. But we went to work there for probably 5 years. It was myself, my brother, and a guy named Anthony Dallas. Anyway, we're all living in the same house. We'd all go our separate directions in the morning, 3:30, 4 in the morning, drive from San Antonio to Laredo and all parts in between, and work with contractors and the gas company. We were representing the gas company, and we were their safety people. And I mean, I remember the charges, and this wasn't my company doing this. This is when we were working for them. We're about $1,500 a day a man, and that man was making about $1,200 a day. So if you work a 6-day week, you coming home. Now that's everything included: gas, your use of your UTV, ATV, whatever you're using. If you need it, all inclusive. If you went to work for a company as an employee, they took that $1,500 and that $1,200 you were supposed to be getting, and they broke it down and gave it to you in different things like your per diem and a com data card, which you'd use every week like your own little ATM card. They would break it down hourly, and then we would get some other benefits when it comes to mileage and things like that we'd put on the trucks.
I'll take the $7,200 a week.
Yeah, and most people did, and that's where it went. And that's what kind of taught me is like people, and this is not to get political, but they want their money and whatever they decide to do with their money, that is their choice. Whether you go and spend it all on nothing or something of value, or you do a little bit of here and there, that is your business. Yeah. When you're made to do something as an afterthought, like for instance Social Security, we have to have that as a safety net. But if most people are making $500 to $1,000 a day, you would hope that they're putting money away, and
you'd hope.
Yeah. I mean, and not just relying on, because when you work 1099, you've got to provide your own retirement plan.
You got to pay your taxes.
Right. You got to pay
your own taxes.
Yeah. There's you're your own business, and that's where a lot of times it isn't hard to find people with safety credentials. But if you're trying to put the little holy trinity together, you're trying to find a person that can get along with people, that knows safety and is willing to work, as a consultant. That is not the easiest thing always to find.
So going into with you mentioned the loan from your now late mother-in-law.
Right.
Was that a loan that was taken and you left your full-time job running into it, or did you build up this while you were working as contractor with other companies, knowing you did that before?
Okay, so in order to, like, I'm sure here at this business too, you usually pay your insurance yearly or semi-annually. So you're talking about putting a big chunk down. So I would think of that $20,000, I would say 12 of it went to insurance.
For your workman's comp.
Brand new company. So I was working for another company so I would work from 6 in the morning till 5, 6 at night. And when I got done with that, then I began working my own company. And I would send out hundreds of emails to different contractors saying what we could do and what I hoped we could do, and what I hoped if we promised that we can make it happen. That's why we're the family and the people that I work with, friends, they are my family, that I can lean on them. A lot of people say don't trust family, but if you can't trust your family, you got some problems going on. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I mean, I can lean on those people more, and they don't want to let me down, and I don't want to let them down. Right. So,
Do you remember your first job?
Oh yeah. As far as me personally, or
yeah, like no, for the company.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Our first job was actually south of San Antonio, and a lot of those areas like that Chesapeake work had all dried up, and it's because they're
just like their stock.
Yeah.
Well, it was about the same time that it started to go the other way.
They fracked it.
So yeah, yeah. So we went back down there, and I had a small contractor that I had worked for personally. And I worked for them in West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania for like a year's time. And so did the guy I was talking about earlier, and Tony. Anyway, he and I lived together in an extended stay. And we would literally I had unbolted my TV where it could come off the dresser. I'd flipped it, put it in their window. We'd barbecue every night, watch LSU games. People would come by and be like, oh, those are those Louisiana guys. We like to party and like to tailgate, and we made our own tailgate. We lived there for a full year and worked for this company in a lot of harsh conditions, a lot of long weeks, working Sundays and things like that. And we proved ourselves. And one day they asked me, would you bring the GM of the company to the airport in Canton, Ohio. And it was about a 2-hour ride. So we're riding. And I was waiting on the right moment to drop it in there like, hey, I think I could do, instead of you hiring me as an employee and covering my workers' comp, unemployment, all the FICA stuff that comes out of a check, would you be willing to use us as your safety firm when you get a job? We come out. Because the hardest part for a company like that, he's got a lot of pieces he's balancing, but not every job needs a safety person. The gas company a lot of times requires that. So what I mean by that is like they may use you for 8 months solid. You're so tired by the time you get done, you want a month off. But you call back 2 weeks after that, and you're like, hey, I'm ready to go back to work. They might not have anything for 6 months. So that's where the third party, I call you when I need you, safety rental person is a lot easier than keeping somebody and stringing them along. We'll go to this job for 2 weeks and then come to the shop and we'll use you here for 2 weeks, and hey, how you feel about working 20 hours this week? It's use you when I need you, call you later when we need you again.
Right.
And I mean, we don't get a whole lot of notice when we get done with a job. It's usually, if we get a week's notice, we feel really good about that. And it's usually, hey, this will be the last week for your guys. And then my job as the owner of the company is to keep those guys working. So the pressure I feel to keep them working is the same pressure they feel not to let me down.
Yeah.
That's where the family thing comes in.
Yeah. So with that and tying this back, so we talked about how there's nothing regulating what you can charge, how you can charge.
Right.
Looking at, you said you can remember your first job at the company. What would you say, and been in business for 8 years, right?
Yes.
That's the number? Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say in regards to percentage-wise? Would you say if you were to do that same job today, what percentage increase would you charge now?
It wouldn't be huge, but it would be more. Obviously, where I'm from in Louisiana, Lake Charles, Louisiana, where the company's at, we have a lot of petrochemical refinery business. So safety has been a real deal for 30 years. You know, in the 80s, they really got into having a safety specific. Usually your operators, they had safety training. Everybody was a firefighter at the plant. That way, if one of the units caught on fire and that kind of thing, because a local fire department is not ready to put out a huge tank full of crude oil back then. Now they are a little more. But anyway, long story short, they have their own fire departments. They were their safety people. They were everything. That I had to leave that rich environment where it sounds like a great business, but to break into that there's so many old contracts, so much old money there, it's hard to get in. So I had to go take the jobs that people wouldn't take. The one stoplight town that had one gas station, and they were charging $9 for a gallon of milk and $5 for a gallon of gas. We took those jobs first, and then now I'm working my way back to where I can now say, hey, we have 8 years, we have this, we have that. Look at all the companies we work for. That resume we're building.
And I guess my last question that I would have is, we talk about funding a lot, obviously, because that's what we're here to talk about, small business finance. But in regards to funding, and people typically seek out funding for, like Jay talked about, with payroll initially, and talking about like scaling up their business or like a capital investment into a new sector. How is Cypress Safety set up for scalability? Are you able to scale out to as many jobs as you're able to manage from your side, knowing you like to be first on the job and you are playing secretary at the same time?
Yeah.
Are you working with like your team of X and we take what we can right now? And
yeah, I don't really have a limit. I don't think we've ever turned down a job. Maybe the only time we've ever turned down a job was when we put out an initial bid. It came back a lot lower. I tried to come back with a counter and said, this is why we need to charge that. Because a lot of times guys are, you hear that money, you hear $500 a day, but you don't realize that's managing 2 households. You may have 3 kids that are going to school, private school, college, whatever. You have a mortgage at home, and you're living in a hotel. But if you price a hotel right now it's pretty cheap. Okay, but like if you go to Odessa, Texas, and Halliburton may have bought out every hotel within 100 miles. The going rate sometimes out there is $150 to $200 a night for a one little Motel 4 hotel room. It's not Motel 6. It's Motel 4. And that might include a refrigerator in it, and so you have to eat out a lot. So anyway, you have everything, the government tries to keep up with their per diem rates and what's going on in those places and what the cost of living is. And that's what we use to dictate per diem and what that person is supposed to, make. And I've got to factor that into the bid. But anyway, yeah, we can scale it way up or way down. I mean, I have 100 safety professionals at my fingertips. The other day we were approached about the deal I was telling you about, the government job with the hospital rooms and the hotels. And I was able to get 10 people that have 5+ years experience, 500 level OSHA training. Most of them are trainers themselves. They have a current CPR AD first aid card, and they have some EM 385 training within probably 2 hours, and put a team together. So I did team 1, team 2, and I managed both those teams. I can get 10 more teams, but I also don't want to call 100 people and then we don't win the bid. Now I've got 90 people that told their wife, some guy called. And,
I may be going.
yeah, we're going. I'm about to, let's go get that new car or something. And, you know, we're about to do something big, and all of a sudden there's nothing. I don't like that, you know, so I want to, it's as needed. So when I need to tap into that well, I'll do it.
Right. So this is actually my last question, but it came from you talking a minute ago. We talked about how you have some jobs that take a year, some take a month.
Yeah.
What's your invoicing like? Are you sending them like weekly? Are you sending them once a month? Are you sending them like, is there a deposit made on the project and then everything due last?
Accountability, the whole inspection thing has really taught me, okay, so if you were in the field working with me, and I say that a lot, with me, not for me, because no one is subservient to anybody. That's why those guys get paid the amount of money they do. And they're the ones with the skills. And every year I have people that say, hey, I need to take a week off. Would you come out, or can you have somebody so I can go get my OSHA 500 or something like that? Or I'm going to get my degree. I've been doing it online. I have to go back for these certain points for these certain classes. So they're constantly chasing it because they're self-motivated to be the top guy in our program, because certain clients will ask for certain standard, whatever. But anyway, back to the invoice and stuff and all that. The guy in the field sends me a timesheet at the end of the week. It is signed by the highest ranking person for that contractor, because if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So he spells out all his days of work, and then that person signs. That is correct. That's sent to me. From that, I break that down into an invoice. I send the signed filled copy and the invoice I made in the office to the accounts receivable, payable department for whatever people we're working for, and then they begin the process of getting us repaid. Usually we're on more of a 14-day to monthly payout, because again, we're all handcuffed to each other, and if a company takes, let's say they have 20 projects going, and we're only providing 2 safety people on 2 specific projects, and their whole company fails, and I allow our invoicing to get out 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and guys, let's say, are working day and night shift, we may lose $100,000 right there, and I might spend $50,000 trying to get it back in legal fees. Because a company went under, of things I have no idea. I'm not sitting in their boardroom.
Right.
So my payback has to be faster, so we don't get so overextended. Because if I'm taking out those loans to pay that, now government money, government jobs, a lot safer, because you're going to get, you're guaranteed, unless the apocalypse happens, we're going to get paid back.
Or a pandemic.
Yeah. Or right. A pandemic. Yeah. And with your payroll stuff, is that pen and paper? Are you using a tool or anything like that? Are they submitting a timesheet electronically? Spreadsheet?
Yeah, usually
like
from the field. We keep it pretty simple. Give it to them 2 ways. They usually have a timesheet or a time card. They'll print out. They'll keep track of what the days they worked and sign for each day, and then the manager will sign. That can be done by hand. Because if you have a guy, and nothing against age discrimination, I want to make sure that if a guy is not computer savvy, that he has a way to get his time in, and so it can be printed and handwritten. I also have a spreadsheet where a guy who's more computer literate pops it up, he punches it in. I'll take it either way, as long as I can read it and I can put it into electronically for me into an invoice and send it off. That's really all that matters. So we are dealing with a wide range of different. I've got 2 brothers, or 5 brothers, but 2 of them have degrees in safety. I can give them anything on the computer, and they can do it pretty well. And they might have a question or 2, but not much. Whereas I could take my dad, who works with me, and he's going to know how to do the computer okay, but it's just much easier for him to do it handwritten. So all he has to do is take that PDF sheet I send him and print off copies and handwrite it. So I try to make it user-friendly, because nobody likes doing paperwork, really. You know, it's part of it. Just try to make it as simple, streamlined.
Right.
Well, we want to thank you for coming in. And the start of your business was basically getting family funding to get your business going. A lot of the money you used to finance your business was lines of credit or factor funding to help their business grow, and making sure your client stays on those nice net 15, net 30, net 60 without letting them go too far before you're so far in debt. And then they go out of business, you get stuck with it because you took care of all your employees.
Right.
So from that standpoint, from the blue collar side of trying to get your business done and sending your invoices, you all do it yourself, which is great. And but we also thank you for coming to tell us how you got your business going and how you keep it going.
Yep.
And I hope everybody got a good knowledge of what Cypress Safety does. And thanks for Spencer and the team for doing everything. Mr. Christian.
Producer, yeah.
Yeah, producer.
All right, so episode 5 of Blue Collar CFO. Be sure to, if you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, please. And if you're listening to us audio only via iTunes or Spotify, I almost said Shopify, or Spotify, please do leave us a review, follow. We appreciate you. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Blue Collar CFO is a React radio production. All contents are filmed and edited in the React studio. For past episodes, as well as our sister shows, check out reactradionc.com. Thanks for listening.